Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλησπέρα σας. Είμαι η Σοφία Πάια, Διευθύντρια των Κοινωνικών Υπηρεσιών της HANAC και είμαι εδώ για να σας ενημερώσω για τα προγράμματα που προσφέρει ο οργανισμός και τα επίκαιρα θέματα του μηνός που σας ενδιαφέρουν. Η εκπομπή αυτή, HANAC Helpline, στηρίζουμε και προσφέρουμε, είναι μια κοινωνική και ενημερωτική προσφορά της HANAC και του New Greek TV. Για όποιες ερωτήσεις ή απορίες έχετε για τα θέματα που αναλύονται στην εκπομπή μας, μπορείτε να τηλεφωνήσετε στο τηλέφωνο 718-396-5054 ή να επισκεφτείτε τα γραφεία μας στο George T. Deary's Tower στο 2740 Hoyt Avenue South στην Astoria μετά από ραντεβού. Και ο πρώτος καλεσμένος για τη σημερινή μας εκπομπή θα είναι ο κύριος Φάμπιο Στρίτ, ο οποίος είναι κοινωνικός συντονιστής για το τμήμα των οικονομικών και θα μιλήσει για ένα πρόγραμμα που σας βοηθάει να παγώσετε το ενοίκιό σας. Fabio, thank you so much for being part of our program today. I'm sure that the information that you will provide will be certainly beneficial and informative for many members of our community and for our viewers. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Sophia. I look forward to helping you and your community and giving any information that our unit can give.
Thank you. So let's start with a simple question. What is SCREE and DREE? What are these programs?
Sure. So we have two programs underneath the rent freeze bubble that we call SCREE and DREE. SCREE stands for the Senior Citizen Rent Increase Exemption. DREE stands for Disabled Rent Increase Exemption. And what our programs do is if you're a senior or you have a qualifying disability and are receiving insurance for it, you can basically freeze your rent if you're living in a rent-regulated apartment. And what that does is it locks them at a specific rate. And every year that you receive an increase, we cover that increase and give those monies to the landlord. So we end up locking your rent in, let's say, at $1,000. And then the next year, it'll go up to $1,100. Instead of you paying the additional $100, we cover that increase, you pay the $1,000. If the year after that, it goes up to, let's say, $1,200, if you renew your benefit, we'll cover the benefit, we'll cover the $200, you end up paying the $1,000. So you could be in the program 10, 20, 30 years. And let's say that the rent goes up to $3,000. As long as you're in the program, you'll still be paying $1,000 and we'll pay the remainder.
Perfect. And just for us to make it a little bit clear, this is a program that freezes your rent. It does not lower the rent, right? Because sometimes people ask us if through this program they could also lower the amount of rent that they are paying, but this is a program that only freezes your rent.
That is correct. This is a rent freeze program. It is not a rent reduction program. We get this question all the time too, Sophia. So it is definitely one that we'd like to clear up. Remember, we lock in the rent at a certain rate. And then what we do is we pay the difference whenever it increases. So it's a rent freeze, not a rent reduction.
Right. And what are the requirements for the SCREE and DREE?
Okay, so for both programs, they're very similar in what's required, but there are a few things to remember. So I'm going to go through each one individually, just so that your audience knows, hey, if I'm a senior, maybe I should apply for this. If I'm disabled, maybe I should apply for this. Or if I'm both, maybe I'll lean in the direction that best suits me. So for the Senior Rent Increase Exemption, or SCREE, you have to be 62 years of age when you apply. Your income has to be $50,000 or below, and at least 1/3 of your monthly income has to go into your rent. In addition, you have to live in a rent-regulated apartment, meaning it's either rent stabilized or it's rent controlled.
Perfect. And you mentioned income. We often get questions about the income and how could somebody calculate their income correctly? What is exactly considered income?
Sure. So whenever we look at income, we look at any type of monies that come into your account. So for example, if you're working, of course, that's considered income. If you receive a pension, that is also considered income. If you receive Social Security benefits, if you're receiving SNAP, or if you're receiving monetary support, which is like money that you might get from a family member or a friend, or maybe an outside service in order to pay your bills, whether it be rent, whether it be utilities or so on and so forth. All those things we do consider as income. So if you know you have a little pension or you have investments and they are getting capital gains on your investments, understand whatever you make from that would be considered income. And that's used to calculate exactly what the total income will be for, your household.
And what is the SCREE and DREE application process? And if you could tell us a little bit about the supporting documentation. I know you mentioned certain requirements such as age, income, and the amount of rent that they are paying. So could you please talk a little bit about the application process? How could one apply and what proof of documents they need to submit with the application?
Sure. So one of the things that I usually do whenever I do a presentation, and Sophia, I know you've been a part of it and part of this whole process, is I usually ask the audience to, do a little joke with me where I have them to take a deep breath in and then let it out. Let's show they relax. And the question I ask is, what did we breathe in? And they always look at me like I'm asking them a trick question. And the answer is always the same because it's not, it's air. Age, income, residence. The three things that you need in order to qualify for any of our program is proof of age. So we will take a driver's license, a passport, a birth certificate. We'll even take a baptismal record in order to prove your age. Income. Anything that you receive is income. So as I said previously, of all the things that we do calculate to figure out what the household member income is. So if you're receiving Social Security, you're going to give your SSA 1099 or a Social Security benefit statement for the prior year. If you have wages, then you're going to give us a copy of your W-2 from the prior year. If you did your taxes, that's usually the easiest thing to give because it's going to have everything all together. It's going to make sure that we can calculate any other pension, income, annuities, or, IRA investments, anything like that. It'll be all together. And the last thing is residence. So if you're living in a rent stabilized apartment, we're going to need a copy of your current and prior lease. If you're living in a rent controlled apartment, we're going to need a copy of the MBR, which is the maximum base rent, or MCR, maximum collectible rent. And if you're living in like a Mitchell-Lama or maybe a Section 213 co-op, in one of those situations, we're going to need the affidavit of household income because that's going to let us know what the rent is, as well as the household makeup and your income. So those are the three things that we're going to require. Remember, age, income, residence.
Perfect. And my next question, Fabio, we often see clients that are concerned to apply about the rent freeze program because sometimes they think that their landlord will get upset. Sometimes they think that the landlord may start an eviction process. Sometimes they think that the rent that they are paying towards the landlord will be less just because they are going to get the benefits. So my question is, do I need my landlord's permission to apply? And can the landlord refuse to participate in the New York City rent freeze program?
That's a phenomenal question, Sophia. And I have a long answer for you, and I also have a short answer for you. So the short answer is no. The long answer is no. And basically the way that our program works is you can apply for it. You do not need your landlord's consent in order to receive SCREE or DREE benefits. Understand that if you apply for the program and you are approved, we send a letter to you that lets you, the tenant, as well as to the landlord, to let them know that, one, you are approved, and this is the type of credit that they will be receiving moving forward. The landlord does not have to agree to it. The landlord does not have to approve it. The landlord does not have to give you the thumbs up or anything if you're thinking about applying. Just understand that as long as you're eligible and you're approved, you can do so, and the landlord will benefit just as much as the tenant. Understand the way the program works, it's not that, you're gypping the landlord out of their money or out of their rent. We give the credit to the landlord. So at the end of the day, the landlord will always receive their rent as long as the tenant is also paying their portion. And they don't have to worry about asking for any type of permission.
Perfect. This is important to actually mention because we do receive many concerns from our clients that are worried if the landlord will stop being nice to them, or they'll start eviction process, or they won't want them in the apartment anymore. So it's important for all of our viewers to know that this is a program that will support the increase. This is only helping the client to freeze their rent, but will support any kind of increase moving forward for as long as they remain active in the program.
That is correct. Just be assured, if you're thinking about applying for SCREE or you're thinking about applying for DRE, understand that these are things that will help you as a tenant to lock in your rent and pay any increases moving forward. And the landlord doesn't have to agree. You can have a mean landlord, you can have a nice landlord. Understand in either scenario, as long as you're at least underneath the SCREE or DRE umbrella, the landlord would get their credit and you'll be able to live in your apartment peacefully and happily.
Perfect. And the other scenario that I would like to mention a little bit is when we have clients that are already enrolled with the program, and for certain reasons their income changes. Can the frozen rent be reduced if there is a decrease in the household income?
That's a good one too. So you have some great questions, Sophia. So with that one, if there is a permanent loss of income of at least 20% or more, you can apply as a tenant for something called a redetermination. What a redetermination is what we can do is, instead of you paying, like, let's say I used $1,000 as the frozen rent, right? You can end up paying less, right? Now, when it comes down to what we consider as a permanent loss of income, we usually look at it as if somebody moved out, somebody retires, or somebody passes away. Those are usually the three things that are permanent because they're probably not going to change, right? And if it does, just let us know. We'll look at the scenario on a case-by-case basis. But if that does happen, we can reduce, let's say your frozen rent of $1,000 to maybe $800 or maybe $600. It all varies based on the amount of income that is lost and that you let us know. But that is one of the scenarios where we are allowed to lower the frozen rent. So the tenant can benefit during a time of either loss or when their income total changes.
Can a family member inherit my benefits?
Yes, but there is a little bit of nuance to it. The way it works, whenever you want to transfer a benefit from a person to a person, we call that a benefit takeover. Now, in order to qualify for a benefit takeover, there has to be a household member that we have on record that is eligible for either SCREE or DRE. Meaning, let's say we have Jane Doe and John Doe, right? Jane Doe is the tenant of record and John Doe is just a household member. And both of them are over the age of 62. Let's say something happens to Jane and we want to transfer the benefit over to John. As long as John is 62 or he's receiving disability, he can then apply for a benefit takeover and now move the benefit over into his name. So now he can benefit from the SCREE, benefit. Let's say there was a child and the child was maybe suffering from some type of disability and receiving disability insurance. As long as they're over the age of 18 and we have them as a household member, we can then do the exact same thing we did with John and transfer the benefit over to them. It doesn't matter if they were receiving SCREE previously and somebody else that's an eligible household member qualifies for DRE. As long as they qualify for one or the other, they'll be eligible to do a benefit takeover if something happens to the tenant of record.
A follow-up question on this would be, does the second person have to be part of the lease, or it's not required?
It's not necessarily required as long as they're a household member and they qualify for something called succession rights. What succession rights are is basically the landlord establishing that you as a household member in apartment 1A have been living there maybe all of your life, you're a spouse of the tenant, or maybe you're a child of the tenant, and that is your home, that's your primary residence. What succession rights does is it transfers the ownership of the apartment into that new person's name. So even if your name was never on the lease and you've just lived there your entire life, you can still have the new lease put in your name, or at least a letter stating that you are now the tenant of record for that particular apartment.
And how does a family member apply to take over the benefits?
So it's pretty simple. What they have to do is they need to fill out something called a benefit takeover form. They'll include either a letter of succession along with that form, and if they have it, the new lease with their name on it. Some landlords, what they'll do is they'll transfer the remaining lease over to the new tenant, right? Or what they'll do is they'll just make a brand new lease altogether and put it in that new tenant's name. But those are going to be the main things that you're going to do. You're going to give that form, benefit takeover form, a copy of the succession letter, and preferably a copy of the new lease with your name on it.
And what happens to someone, Fabio, if they decide to move? Does this benefit transfer over?
So in certain scenarios, the benefit can transfer over. What we do is we call that a benefit transfer, right? So if you're going, let's say, and I've dealt with this particular scenario many times, you having a person, maybe they're over the age of 70 or 80, older person, they live on 5G. It's a walk up. That's a lot of stairs to go up. I'm a young man, and going up 5 stairs after, going to the gym makes me immediately want to take a break on the 3rd stairwell. All right. So let's say they want to move from 5G to 1B. They're moving from the 5th floor to the 1st floor. In a situation like that, they're probably moving from one rent stabilized apartment to another, but the 1st floor maybe has a little bit more rent or maybe a little bit less rent. In either scenario, what they're going to do is they're going to fill out a benefit transfer form to let us know that they're moving from one apartment to another. Now, whatever apartment they move into, it has to be a rent regulated apartment like the apartment that they were leaving. So what happens is if they're going from 5G to 1B and then both of them are rent stabilized, they'll be fine. If they're moving from maybe 5G to a brand new address that's also rent stabilized or even rent controlled, that'll be fine too. They need to be aware that wherever they move, the credits transfer over, not the frozen rent. So if the legal rent in one place is a little bit higher, that difference may be added on to their frozen rent. So it could be a little bit more expensive, right? But they'll still benefit from SCREE or DREE and be able to transfer it to wherever they go. They just have to be mindful that they have to move from one rent regulated apartment to another rent regulated apartment, fill out that form with a copy of the lease, and they'll be able to transfer their benefit.
So it is important to for everyone who is listening to us to know that before they move, they have to know that on the new apartment, in order for the for them to qualify for the benefits, they have to meet the eligibility requirements. And as you mentioned, the rent amount could change based on the new rents that they are going to have on the new apartment.
That's correct. That's correct.
So now we have clients that are benefiting from SCREE or DREE. What is the renewal process and what are the documents of proof that they need to submit?
Sure. Our renewal process is fairly easy. What you're going to need is whenever you receive, let's say you're in a rent stabilized apartment and you get a new lease every 2 years, right? Because you signed on to a 2-year agreement. That's also the about a time you're going to renew your SCREE or DREE. Your benefit will always last for the length of your lease. So if your lease ends about 60 days before your lease is about to end and you're going to renew it and receive the new lease, what we do is we send you a copy of the renewal application. You're going to complete the renewal application. You're going to give your income for the prior year. So let's say you're renewing right now in 2022, you're going to give your income from 2021. And in addition, you're going to give a copy of the new signed lease. The lease has to be signed by both the tenant as well as the landlord. And you're going to give those 3 things together. So the renewal application that's complete, a copy of your income for the prior year, as well as your lease that's signed by both you and the landlord. If you're in a rent controlled apartment and you don't have a lease, that's okay. You're just going to give a copy of the new MBR or MCR.
Great. My other question is if somebody is required to report any changes during the year, let's say that their income changes, household composition, are they required to report these changes during the year before their, let's say, lease or SCREE benefits end, or do they have to wait for the renewal period?
So that's a good question because it varies from situation to situation. And I'll make it make sense. So let's say somebody moves out of the apartment and you want to let us know that, hey, this person moved out and, my income's going to decrease or something like that. At that point, it may be advisable for them to let us know and also apply for a redetermination. Let's say there's a major capital improvement or an MCI, and something like that could be the landlord decides to put in a new roof or renovate the lobby or put in a new elevator or give everybody new toilets. Hooray, new toilets, right? In situations like that, the rent can go up. What you would need to do is let us know that there is an MCI in place and the landlord's charging additional monies. And what we can do is an adjustment in order to compensate or at least cover that increase. So I will say that it's usually in your tenant's best interest to let us know if something does happen between the year. But if it's like somebody went on vacation for 6 months and then came back on the 7th, they don't need to let us know. If, you want to change a tenant representative and, it's to somebody else, you can do that for a change form as well. But for the most part, you can wait for your renewal, but unless it's something like an MCI, somebody passing, somebody moving, or a major change in your apartment, it is advised that you let us know before you renew your benefit.
And my last question, Fabio, would be what happens if I'm over the income eligibility for a renewal period?
Got it. So that one happens. Sometimes people win the lottery or their income goes up or, maybe somebody moves in and now it's going to change what the entire household member income is. In situations like that, let's say it's, the lottery. We're like, hey, you won $10,000 and your income before was $45,000. So now you're over by, $5,000, right? In a situation like that, when you renew your benefit, because you're over the income threshold of 50,000, your application will be revoked, right? But what that means, though, is the next year, if you apply again as an initial and you let us know that, you're applying again, your income went back down to below 50,000, you can be put back on the program. Whenever there's a situation where your income spikes up for a year, whether it's due to an outside source that fluctuates, right? If you apply the next following year, the next calendar year, we can put you onto the program at your previous frozen rent. But it requires you to do so the next year. Okay, if you wait 2 years or 3 years or 4 years down the line, you won't be eligible for that situation. So just be advised, if your income goes up and you know that you're probably going to be bounced out of SCREE or DREE, that's okay. Just remember to apply again the following year.
That's actually great. It gives people the opportunity to go back or reinstate the benefits and gain the same rent amount that was frozen, let's say, a year ago before their income changed. So that's a great option.
Yes, it is. And it definitely helps people because sometimes things happen. We're aware of that. We understand that anything can happen. People can win lottery, incomes can change, and so on and so forth. We want to be able to accommodate you and at least get you back in the program so you can benefit from it moving forward.
Fabio, thank you so much for being with us today. I truly appreciate all the information that you shared with us, and I'm sure it will be very valuable and informative to all of our viewers. I know some of them are already familiar with you because you're always present on our workshops. And hopefully now that things are opening up, we'll have more workshops in person and we'll address issues and case by case issues with our clients and tenants. So thank you so much for being present and thank you so much for everything you do to help us.
It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm glad to help out the community. Everybody at your area has always been nice to me, which just makes it easy and always heartwarming whenever I can do a presentation. So if you ever see me, or if you're ever at the center, by all means, ask questions. I definitely say enroll in the program if you're eligible. It will help you, especially in this time where rents are going up. Be advised, this is something that could help you out. It doesn't cost anything. All it costs is time, right? And a little bit of writing something on some piece of paper. So let us help you and let us get you in these programs and make it so that you can save some money on rent.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Στο δεύτερο κομμάτι της εκπομπής μας, κυρίες και κύριοι, έχουμε καλεσμένη την κυρία Ευγενία Λαμπρόπουλος-Φρέιζης, η οποία θα μιλήσει για κοινωνικές υπηρεσίες και θέματα που είναι επίκαιρα για αυτό το μήνα. Ευγενία, καλησπέρα. Σε ευχαριστώ που είστε ξανά στην εκπομπή μας.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Χαίρομαι που είμαι εδώ.
Ας πούμε λίγο περιληπτικά για το θέμα που μιλούσαμε με τον πρώτο καλεσμένο, που είναι ένα καταπληκτικό πρόγραμμα που παγώνει το ενίκιο των ανθρώπων, αυτών που δικαιούνται βεβαίως. Ας πούμε λίγο δύο λόγια, Ευγενία, για το SCREE και το DREE program.
Ναι, το SCREE και το DREE program, όπως έχουμε πει και άλλες φορές, είναι ένα πρόγραμμα που δίνει η πολιτεία που μπορείτε να παγώσετε το ενοίκιο σας. Έχει διάφορα πράγματα που μπορεί να σας πει άμα δικαιούστε ή όχι. Το ένα είναι ότι πρέπει να είσαστε πάνω από 62 χρονών για να κάνετε αυτή την αίτηση για το συγκεκριμένο πρόγραμμα του SCREE. Θα πούμε μετά για το DREE. Πάνω από 62 χρονών πρέπει να κάνετε λιγότερα από 50.000 το χρόνο σε εισόδημα. Εξαρτάται με ποιον μένετε. Άμα μένετε με συγκάτοικο, άμα μένετε με τη γυναίκα σας, με τον άντρα σας, όλοι μαζί πρέπει να κάνετε λιγότερα από 50.000 για να δικαιούστε στο πρόγραμμα και πρέπει να πληρώνετε, δηλαδή το 1/3 από το εισόδημά σας πρέπει να πληρώνετε προς το ενοίκιο σας. Άμα είσαστε σε όλα αυτά τα προγράμματα μέσα και μένετε επιπλέον σε διαμέρισμα ή building που είναι λιγότερα παραπάνω από 6 οικογενειών, μπορείτε δικαιούστε να μπείτε σε αυτό το πρόγραμμα. Μπορείτε να ωφεληθείτε πάρα πολύ, γιατί μπορεί να χαμηλώσει το ενοίκιο σας και να είναι σταθερό, παγωμένο και ασχέτως κάθε φορά που κάνετε την ανανέωση για τη λίστα σας, ασχέτως άμα ο ιδιοκτήτης ανεβάζει το ενοίκιο του, που μπορεί και έχει το δικαίωμα, εσείς θα πληρώσετε το παγωμένο ενοίκιο, αρκεί να κάνετε την ανανέωση κάθε 1 ή 2 χρόνια.
Για να πούμε αναλυτικά, Ευγενία, δεν είναι ότι το πρόγραμμα αυτό θα χαμηλώσει το ενοίκιο, έτσι, γιατί πολλοί κόσμος μας ρωτάει αν θα χαμηλωθεί το ενοίκιο από το ποσό που αυτοί που είναι τη στιγμή που κάνουν την αίτηση. Το πρόγραμμα αυτό απλά βοηθάει με το να παγώνει το ενοίκιο. Δεν είναι ένα πρόγραμμα που χαμηλώνει το ενοίκιο. Αλλά πάλι είναι καλό το παγώνει, γιατί δεν βλέπουν τις αυξήσεις. Κάθε φορά που αυξάνεται το ενοίκιο τους, κάθε 1 ή 2 χρόνια, ανάλογα με το είδος της λίστας του συμβόλαιου του σπιτιού που υπογράφουν, η αύξηση αυτή, λοιπόν, εφόσον παραμένουν στο πρόγραμμα του SCREE και του DREE, δεν θα δουν αυτή την αύξηση και η αύξηση θα πληρωθεί από την πολιτεία προς τον ιδιοκτήτη. Και επειδή θέλω να αναφέρω το γεγονός ότι ο ιδιοκτήτης δεν χρειάζεται να είναι μέρος, δηλαδή δεν απαραίτητα χρειάζεται ο ιδιοκτήτης να συμφωνήσει για κάποιον να κάνει αυτή την αίτηση, και δεν θα υπάρχει πρόβλημα, γιατί υπάρχουν πελάτες που μας ρωτάνε αν ο ιδιοκτήτης μπορεί να θυμώσει με αυτή την αίτηση που θα κάνουν. Λοιπόν, δεν υπάρχει λόγος ανησυχίας. Εάν κάποιος δικαιούται να πάρει το SCREE και το DREE και παίρνουν τα benefits, το ενοίκιο τους παγώνει και η διαφορά πληρώνεται από την πολιτεία.
Ακριβώς. Αυτό είναι μεγάλο θέμα που δημιουργούμε πολλές φορές με τους πελάτες μας, γιατί φοβούνται, όπως είπε Σοφία, και δεν θέλουν να κάνουν τίποτα λάθος ή μην τους πει τίποτα ο ιδιοκτήτης του σπιτιού. Είναι δικαίωμά σας, άμα είσαστε όλες και δικαιούστε, να κάνετε αυτή την αίτηση και θα σας πει το SCREE πόσο θα πληρώνετε, θα το παγώσει σε αυτό το ποσό, που του καθενός είναι διαφορετικό. Το ίδιο γίνεται με το πρόγραμμα του DREE. Είναι ακριβώς τα ίδια τα συστήματα, απλώς είναι για ανθρώπους που έχουν μία αναπηρία και είναι λιγότερα από 62 χρονών. Το κάνουμε και αυτό, όπως είπαμε και πριν, μια αίτηση είναι, βάζουμε το εισόδημα, το περσινό πάντοτε, θέλουν και τη καινούρια και την παλιά τη λίστα. Άμα είναι πρώτη φορά που κάνετε την αίτηση, χρειαζόσαστε την παλιά και την καινούρια τη λίστα. Άμα είναι ανανέωση, χρειαζόσαστε μόνο την καινούρια λίστα. Θα σας πούμε ό,τι χρειάζεται, δεν υπάρχει πρόβλημα, δεν υπάρχει φοβία. Είμαστε εδώ για σας και ό,τι θέλετε μπορείτε να ρωτήσετε.
Πολύ ωραία. Και ένα άλλο πρόγραμμα που θα ήθελα να αναφερθούμε λίγο σήμερα είναι το Cooling Assistance Program, το πρόγραμμα που προσφέρει ένα air condition δωρεάν στους ανθρώπους που δικαιούνται. Λόγω του καλοκαιριού τώρα, η ζέστη στη Νέα Υόρκη έχει πάρα πολύ ζέστη και υπάρχει αυτό το πρόγραμμα λοιπόν που βοηθάει τους ανθρώπους να πάρουν ένα air condition δωρεάν από την πολιτεία. Βεβαίως για όλα τα προγράμματα της πολιτείας υπάρχουν κάποια κριτήρια και προϋποθέσεις. Πες μας λίγο, Ευγενία, για αυτό το πρόγραμμα.
Αυτό το πρόγραμμα είναι για ανθρώπους που χρειάζονται air condition για την υγεία τους. Μέχρι τώρα η πολιτεία ζητούσε με την αίτηση να βάλουμε ένα γράμμα από τον γιατρό για να δικαιολογηθείτε γιατί χρειαζόσαστε το air condition. Φέτος έχει αλλάξει και δεν είναι υποχρεωτικό να μπει το γράμμα αυτό. Είναι μια αίτηση που κάνουμε. Για να πάρουμε την αίτηση όμως δεν μπορούμε να τη τυπώσουμε τόσο εύκολα. Παίρνουμε τηλέφωνο το γραφείο και μας στέλνουν την αίτηση σε εσάς, τη φέρετε σε εμάς, να τη συμπληρώσουμε και τη στέλνουμε. Αυτό το πρόγραμμα άρχισε 1η Μαΐου και τελειώνει τέλη Αυγούστου. Και ό,τι έχουν, άμα εξοφληθούν δηλαδή τα air conditions και δεν έχουν άλλο, δεν έχουν. Μέχρι εκείνο τον καιρό δίνουν ό,τι μπορούν και αυτοί, αρκεί να δικαιούστε. Μια αίτηση είναι και άμα είσαστε μέσα σε άλλα προγράμματα σαν τα food stamps ή το Medicaid, είναι πιο εύκολα να τα πάρετε.
Πολύ ωραία. Και το τελευταίο θέμα που θα ήθελα να μιλήσουμε λίγο σήμερα είναι ένα θέμα που είναι σημαντικό, όπως είναι η διατροφή και οι διατροφικές ανάγκες των ανθρώπων και ποια είναι τα προγράμματα που μπορούν να καλύψουν αυτές τις διατροφικές ανάγκες και που βοηθάνε τους ανθρώπους να αγοράσουν διάφορα τρόφιμα ή και να πάρουν τροφή από κάποιο κέντρο ηλικιωμένων κτλ. Ένα από τα προγράμματα, όπως γνωρίζουμε και έτσι συζητάμε συνέχεια στην εκπομπή μας, είναι τα food stamps, το Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, όπως τα γνωρίζουμε σαν τα κουπόνια φαγητού.
Ακριβώς. Λέγεται SNAP. Είναι μια αίτηση που κάνουμε. Παίρνετε τα κουπόνια κάθε μήνα σε μια κάρτα, EBT κάρτα. Άμα είσαστε και μέλος του Medicaid, είναι η ίδια κάρτα, η Blue Benefit κάρτα. Είναι μια αίτηση, συμπληρώνουμε, βάζουμε όλα τα στοιχεία. Καλύτερα να την πάτε στο γραφείο, στο δικό τους, στο 3220 Northern Boulevard, το Food Stamp Office, και την παραδίνετε εκεί πέρα. Όταν σας στείλουν ένα γράμμα πίσω, θα σου πούνε άμα εγκριθήκατε και πόσα λεφτά θα παίρνετε το μήνα. Είναι για ένα άτομο το πιο πολύ που μπορούν να πάρουν $250. Άμα είναι οικογενειακός, πάνε πάνω από 350. Και τώρα, μέσω τη διάρκεια του COVID και της πανδημίας, δίνουν επιπλέον $95 κάθε μήνα. Ακόμα δεν ξέρουμε πότε θα σταματήσει αυτό το πρόγραμμα, αλλά μέχρι τώρα τα νέα που λαβαίνουμε ισχύει ακόμα και ακόμα προχωρεί. Αυτό είναι πολύ καλό πρόγραμμα που μπορεί να ωφεληθείτε. Είναι καλά λεφτά που μπορείτε να χρησιμοποιείτε όποτε πάτε στη μαρκέτα.
Πολύ ωραία. Και το άλλο πρόγραμμα που επίσης έτσι είναι καλό και δίνει την ευκαιρία στον καθένα που ενδιαφέρεται να έχει μια επιπλέον βοήθεια. Συχνά παίρνουμε την ερώτηση εάν αυτό το πρόγραμμα έχει να κάνει με τα food stamps και αν κάποιος που έχει food stamp, τα κουπόνια φαγητού που μόλις προαναφέραμε, δικαιούται να πάρει και αυτό το κουτί με φαγητά που μοιράζεται στο κέντρο ενηλίκων στη HANAC κάθε μήνα. Βεβαίως είναι πρόγραμμα της πολιτείας και λέγεται Commodity Supplemental Food Program και είναι ένα πρόγραμμα που δίνει ένα κουτί με φαγητά κάθε μήνα. Αυτά τα φαγητά μπορεί να είναι διαφορετικά. Μπορεί να είναι κονσερβοποιημένα φρούτα, κονσερβοποιημένα λαχανικά, όσπρια, νομίζω δίνουν διάφορους χυμούς, γάλα, τυρί, οπότε είναι μια φορά το μήνα. Αυτό το κουτί μέσα στο κέντρο ενηλίκων της HANAC, απλά πρέπει να εγγραφτούν, έτσι δεν είναι?
Ναι, ακριβώς. Απλώς είναι μια πολύ μικρή διαδικασία. Ερχόσαστε στο κέντρο, είναι η κοπέλα εκεί μπροστά, στο κτίριο που θα πάρει τα στοιχεία σας και θα της πείτε ότι θέλετε να πάρετε αυτό το κουτί. Έρχεται μια φορά το μήνα. Δεν ξέρω ακριβώς ποια συγκεκριμένη μέρα, αλλά μπορούμε να το μάθουμε. Αυτό δεν υπάρχει πρόβλημα. Θα πρέπει να φέρετε και να δείξετε το εισόδημά σας. Συνήθως οι πιο πολλοί πελάτες μας είναι με το Social Security, θα φέρετε το Social Security το γράμμα, το award letter, πόσα λεφτά κάνετε το μήνα, και δεύτερο ένα ID, διαβατήριο, driver's license, New York ID, ό,τι έχετε για να αποδείξετε ότι είσαστε εσείς. Και κάθε μήνα έρχεται και παίρνετε αυτά τα κουτιά και μόνο πρέπει να φέρετε ένα καροτσάκι γιατί είναι πολύ βαριή το κουτί αυτό. Αλλά είναι καλό πρόγραμμα και αυτό. Πάρα πολλοί πελάτες μας το παίρνουν.
Και επίσης υπάρχει και μια άλλη επιλογή των ανθρώπων που θέλουν να κάνουν, οι άνθρωποι που δεν μπορούν να βγουν από το σπίτι τους, και ειδικά τώρα με τη ζέστη. Υπάρχουν άλλες επιλογές όπως είναι τα Meals on Wheels. Ένα πρόγραμμα που μπορεί να φέρει το πακέτο, το φαγητό στο σπίτι του καθένα. Και δεν χρειάζεται ο καθένας να πηγαίνει σε κέντρα ενηλίκων για να τα παραλάβει ή για να φάει εκεί. Οπότε και αυτό είναι ένα ωραίο πρόγραμμα. Και επίσης πιστεύω υπάρχουν και άλλες επιλογές, Ευγενία, που κάποιος θα μπορούσε να πάρει τρόφιμα από μερικά σχολεία τώρα κατά τη διάρκεια του καλοκαιριού.
Ναι, πρώτον το Meals on Wheels, να βγάλουμε μια σύγκριση, δεν είναι κουτί όπως παίρνουμε και δίνουμε αυτά κάθε μήνα. Είναι απλώς φαγητά, καταψυγμένα και σας ζεσταίνουν και τα φέρνουν στο σπίτι. Ό,τι άλλες οργανώσεις που έρχουν, μπορούμε να πάρουμε το 311 να μάθουμε, αλλά το ένα πρόγραμμα είναι για φαγητό, τα σχολεία, τα δημοτικά, τα public schools της Νέας Υόρκης μέχρι τώρα και στη διάρκεια το pandemic δίνανε κάθε μεσημέρι φαγητά στην πόρτα τους. Αυτό, εφόσον τα σχολεία έχουν τελειώσει για το καλοκαιρινό, συνεχίζονται αυτά τα προγράμματα από την 5 Ιουλίου, την επόμενη Τρίτη, αρχίζουν πάλι αυτό το πρόγραμμα. Αν θέλετε πιο πολλές πληροφορίες, μπορούμε να πάρουμε τηλέφωνο το 311, να δούμε ακριβώς πού, σε ποιο συγκεκριμένο σχολείο δίνεται, γιατί δεν είναι σε όλα. Αλλά και αυτό είναι μια λύση για κάποιον που χρειάζεται κάτι φαγητό επίγον ή δεν έχει αυτή τη στιγμή. Είναι κάθε μέρα, δεν ζητάνε για ID, δεν πρέπει να είσαι, ούτε χαρτιά να έχεις. Είναι και αυτό πάρα πολύ καλό πρόγραμμα και μπορεί να σας οφειλήσει, άμα χρειάζεται.
Πολύ ωραία. Ευγενία, σε ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ που ήσουν σήμερα κοντά μας. Όπως έχουμε πει και σε άλλες εκπομπές, όλες αυτές οι πληροφορίες είναι χρήσιμες και τους ανθρώπους που τα γνωρίζουν, αλλά και αυτούς που τα γνωρίζουν και μπορούν να μοιραστούν αυτές τις πληροφορίες με φίλους, οικογένεια. Είμαστε εδώ πάντα να σας συμβουλέψουμε, να κάνουμε ό,τι μπορούμε για να αποκτήσετε όλες αυτές τις κοινωνικές υπηρεσίες και να σας βοηθήσουμε με όποιο τρόπο μπορούμε. Σε ευχαριστώ και πάλι που ήσουν σήμερα κοντά μας.
Ευχαριστώ και εγώ, Σοφία. Να είστε καλά.
Σε αυτό το σημείο, κυρίες και κύριοι, η εκπομπή μας έχει φτάσει στο τέλος της. Σας εύχομαι όλους ένα όμορφο και ασφαλές καλοκαίρι. Ανανεώνουμε το τηλεοπτικό μας ραντεβού για τον επόμενο μήνα. Καλό σας βράδυ.